meditate deeply on these things. So I remember the first night that I did this class last week, somebody came up to me at the end and said, you know, I didn't understand pretty much anything that you said until the meditation. And you know, many of us have had that experience, I think, of like, you know, cracking our heads over and over again against the, you know, against the material, trying to understand the material. But then when you meditate on it, things start to click a little bit. They start to fit into place. So daily meditation is not, every spiritual tradition has some form of meditation. See, they call it prayer in some traditions, or they call it contemplation, or something like that. But every spiritual tradition has a meditation. Every proper spiritual tradition has some form of study, so that you'll know what to meditate on, mostly, right? So study meditation. But then in addition to that, learning how to be a good person, learning how to be a kind person. And the reason for that is because things are empty. Because things are empty, everything's an interpretation. So then the next question is, how come I'm interpreting the world the way I am? How come? What's forcing me to see the world the way I do? The world is blank. The world is empty. The world is not out there. See? And we'll do another chapter that Arya Nagarjuna proves that there is no world out there. Cannot be. Okay? Cannot be a world in here either the way you think it is. Can't be a world out there the way you think it is. The world is empty. But the world works. It works. It functions. You know, the Dalai Lama sometimes says you don't need any other proof that things exist than the fact that we suffer. Of course they exist. We're unhappy. How could is unhappiness just some kind of like, you know, illusion in that sense? That it's just like, oh, if I, you know, kind of like shook my head a little bit, I'd kind of like not suffer anymore? So it doesn't work like that. Can't work like that, right? So things do work. They work to make us unhappy. Mostly. We are creating the causes and conditions for having a world make us unhappy. We're recreating, creating and recreating all the time the goal that we're grasping onto. We're recreating our own suffering. And it's very, very perverse. When you start to understand a little bit about karma and emptiness, it becomes really sad. I mean, then you can really get sad. Then you can really go up to your garret, is that what they say? And just like suffer up there with your beret in your garret. Because life is suffering. Life is sad. It is sad. It's sad to realize how masochistic we all are. It's very sad. And you know, I'm in the business of like, you know, doing these things like pretty much regularly, not just here but around the country. And I'll tell you, like one after another, of people, normal-looking people looking like they're having a normal, you know, affluent American life. One after another, they'll come up and tell you the most unbelievable stories about their lives, about their personal lives, about what, you know, everyone is in this condition. Everyone is actually in this condition. And we're partly surviving because we're in denial. We're partly surviving. We're partly like being able to get through another day because we're in denial about the suffering. And you can't make any progress, actually, in a spiritual life if you remain in denial about your own suffering. You can't make any progress in your own happiness, and you can't help others. More importantly, you can't really be a compassionate person. Why? Because you haven't figured out that you're suffering. How can you have any compassion for the suffering of others? You say, well, you know, maybe they're okay. I don't know. Maybe they'll be all right. So I guess I'm kind of all right. So maybe they're kind of all right. The only way that we really figure out the suffering that other people are going through is when we realize it ourselves, in our own lives. It's the precondition for compassion. The precondition for compassion is, my God, my life isn't working out. And other lives are just like mine. We get compassion for others when things go wrong for us. And things are always going on for us. We're just not paying attention. See, so the first thing, I mean, you know, this is the bad news, okay? This is reality. This is the bad news of reality. It's the first thing that the Buddha said when the Buddha arose from his meditation, which got him enlightened. First thing he said, first thing that came out of his mouth, you know, he said, I don't think he said, you know, but he said, life is suffering. And the reason that it was the first thing he said was he knew for the first time that that it didn't have to be there. Because he was enlightened. He was outside of suffering. And then he saw, oh my God, I was in suffering up until now. And everyone else who's not me, who's not enlightened, is suffering. Because I know what it's like not to be suffering. We don't have a clue what it's like not to be suffering, actually. Have you thought about that? We don't really have a clue what it would be like to be perfectly happy. Just do it at any moment. Do a body-mind scan. There's always something wrong. Always something wrong. Something wrong physically. When there's not something big wrong physically, there's something little wrong physically, right? There's always just something, right? Some like a little scab or, right? And then what about mentally? Always dissatisfaction. Always some little thing like, oh, it's too hot, it's too cold, let's do this, do that, do that, this, right? Always just this, so people hear this from Buddhists, they say, life is suffering, they go, you Buddhists, you're so pessimistic. But but it's actually just the case. And here's the interesting thing, okay, then we gotta start. Here's the interesting thing. People who recognize that life is suffering are happier. Immediately. People who really, look at the Dalai Lama, okay? Look what's going on in Tibet right now. See, awful, tragic things, right? Awful, tragic things. And the Dalai Lama, do you think the Dalai Lama, is unaware of the suffering that's going on in Tibet? Is he unaware of the suffering of life? Was he sick that day in the monastery when they taught life is suffering? Buddhism 101? Did the Dalai Lama, was he absent from that class, do you think? Do you think he knows that life is suffering? And have you seen the Dalai Lama? You can hardly contain himself. Happy fear. So what's the connection? We don't get the connection. We don't get the connection between understanding deeply that life is suffering and the happiness that comes from that understanding. We go like, wow, that's so paradoxical. How can somebody who understands deeply suffering be so happy? What do you think? He's not hanging on to the coal anymore. See, he's let go of the coal. He's given up on the idea that the things that we think will bring us happiness will bring happiness. He let go of that coal. People like that let go of that coal. They've given up on the idea that the very things that we're pursuing over and over and over again, like gerbils on a gerbil wheel, will make us happy. And as a result of giving up, we call renunciation. As a result of renunciation, happiness starts to come. But you can't start to have happiness unless you let go of the coal. So what's the coal, do you think? Well, in general, and then we've got to start because it's a long lesson. But in general, the coal that we're holding on to is thinking that happiness lies anywhere else than in ourselves. In any kind of external object, in any kind of other person, in any kind of money or a job or anything like that. Thinking that happiness is out there is the problem. That's the basic problem. And if you let go of that idea and say, well, then there's only other one place that could be, must be inside me, then you start. Then you can start. And then you can start doing the other things that you should be doing on a daily basis to cultivate the happiness within. And the secret of that is in case we all die before the class ends. The secret of that is to stop worrying about your own happiness all the time and worry about the happiness of others. Then what? You'll be happy. Inside. And then you can have a new car, not have a new car, you'll be happy. You can have a new boyfriend, not have a boyfriend, you'll be happy. Have a new girlfriend, it doesn't matter. The externals won't matter at all. The externals won't matter. You see, and people, look at the people who really are happy or seem to be happy. Look at the people like Dalai Lama, look at the people like that. Does their externals, does it seem to matter? Does the Dalai Lama get really, really bummed out and starts, loses his happiness and joy when, violence breaks out in Tibet? Does he lose his joy then? It's not like he likes the violence, of course. See? But he's got the inner peace. He understands the true causes of happiness are anything other than responding to violence with violence. Did you get that? Anything other than being unhappy about or wanting to combat the unhappiness of others with more unhappiness, you could say. Combating the violence with violence, combating the anger with anger, combating the unhappiness with unhappiness. So he and many of the other great leaders, spiritual leaders, political leaders also, have always understood this. Gandhiji understood this. That you cannot get peace through war. You cannot get happiness through unhappiness. By making other people unhappy. You cannot get patience by anger. You cannot get peace of mind by disrupting the peace of mind of others. See, so he knows the secret. He knows the secret, and he's let go of the coal. And so what we do when we're studying wisdom is understand a little bit about like how reality is working, how it is not working, and how it is working. And then when we do the method side of things, we go, well, now that I understand the rules, now let me work the system. The method side is working the system. Compassion, kindness towards others, selfless action instead of selfish action. It's all just working the system. The system of happiness bringing, rather than working the system in the way that we have up until now, which is just to reproduce more unhappiness for ourselves and others, all over and over and over again. By being selfish, by being unkind, by not caring about other people, by returning anger with anger, by returning violence with violence. So that's the secret of life right there. Should we all go home?